Hi guys, welcome back. This is Matt Chat, episode 438, featuring the third and final installment of my interview with the fantastic Mr. Colin McComb. In this part of the interview, we talk about Torment, Tides of Numenera. We also talk about Planescape Torment. What does Colin think about those games? How does Torment follow? What happened with the stretch goals? We also talk about Wasteland 2 and how to be smart when setting up the scope of your game as well as stretch goals. Got a lot to cover here, so without further ado, here is Mr. Colin McComb. What was it like at TSR? Was Planescape considered like the flagship series?
No.
That's kind of what I suspected. I mean, what was it really like there at TSR regarding?
Boy, I don't want to disparage people who are no longer no longer with us, but I felt like the executives at the time didn't really have a handle on what D&D was. Most of them hadn't played the game; they were in it for business.
What?
Yeah, yeah. When Lorraine Williams came in, she brought in a different C-suite essentially. And those people were focused purely on business. They didn't care about the product so much as long as the money was coming. So, so by their standards, Forgotten Realms was definitely the golden-haired child. And it should have been too. I mean, Ed Greenwood spent so much time and so much effort building out this world, and it was detailing it all over the place. I mean, there is so much thought that's gone into that world that I don't begrudge that status at all. But Forgotten Realms was definitely the big thing at TSR at the time.
Mm-hmm. I've talked to a lot of CRPG designers, as you know, and I sense sometimes that not to name any names, but I'm sure you know who I'm talking about, and it's almost like I don't really want to work on like the standard Forgotten Realms type games. That's not creative for me. I want to work on something like a Planescape or one of these lesser, or Dark Sun comes up a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So is that what it was like for most people back at TSR?
Yeah, if you're working on Forgotten Realms, and you've basically got a lot of resources behind you, but all of us there were creative people, and we wanted to do something new and different. And there was a bit of a sense that Forgotten Realms is, essentially a Tolkien thing. And there were a lot of people who wanted to move away from being Tolkien.
Well, there's no hobbits.
Yeah, I know. Although perhaps in Chainmail there were.
Oh, sure.
It's just the Tolkien estate managed to sue and get that removed, I guess. So they became halflings instead. But
Kinder D&D or Dragonlance.
It's part of the reason why there were so many other settings that TSR put out, essentially cannibalizing each other for customers. But as part of the reason why we did Birthright, like, okay, well, if we're going to do a standard sword and sorcery thing, let's make it like more interesting with the bloodline powers, or let's do Al-Qadim with the Middle Eastern flavored inspired mythology, or Maztica, the Central and South American style stuff, or Dark Sun or Spelljammer, or just creating something that's not, hey guys, we're going to go on a quest to destroy a ring.
I guess what I'm wondering is, now I'm thinking more about this, is it more about the creators, like you guys basically, or is it like actual demand from fans, people saying, look, we're tired of Forgotten Realms, give us an Arabian themed adventure?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how we managed to get that stuff past the executives, honestly. They would say, okay, well, it looks like, it's time to get a new campaign setting, and we'd be all like, cool. And so we'd throw some pitches at them for cool new settings. And, a lot of it was standard fantasy stuff until the Planescape core group sort of got together. This is after Zeb left, and we decided to start getting really weird. So that was Monty Cook, Ray Valee, Bruce Cordell, Michelle Carter, and me, Andrea Hayday, and David Wise, and we started pitching some really cool off-the-wall kind of things.
Oh, wow.
Ever
now
got
you got me. Now, okay. So, what was which one of those would you most like to go back and?
There was a modern magic one where we were talking about essentially magic is sort of rife in the modern world if you're part of the secret society. So you've got mobsters doing mob hits with ensorcelled weapons. Or you've got gangs tagging the street corners, but their graffiti is actually like wards to keep people out of their territory.
Oh, cool.
And underneath all of this, there's a reality that people are like pulling things out of, like fishing into the deep. But there's monsters like really gross, big cyclopean Cthulhuid things that you could pull up if you're not careful. So that's just off the top of my head for a pitch.
Does that have a name? That
you know what? I've got it over here somewhere.
Well, that sounds fantastic. It kind of relates, dude. I had a question from Adam Majeski. We'll go with that. He's talking about Planescape. Would you like to design a new game in the setting?
Yes.
What would it be about?
It would probably be ancillary to to Planescape Torment. It would address some of the things that happened in Torment, but it wouldn't be about them. I would like to do something going into say the upper planes, or at least doing a visit to the upper planes where the problem isn't just I'm going to hit it with something and make it go away. This is some of what we addressed in Tides of Numenera as well, is you can solve problems without violence. And that's something that I've wanted to work on for quite a while. But yeah, it would have to be.
I'm sure we got a lot of viewers right now, like, take my money, take my money.
I would want to make a game that still explores the sort of philosophical nature of things, because Planescape is perfect for that kind of thing, right? But the question is, what is that question? What's the exploration? And I haven't really thought about it because I didn't think that there was really going to be a chance to make it. But man, would I love to make a new Planescape game. I really love that setting. Do
you prefer that setting then to, I don't want to step on any toes here, but a certain other setting, the Tides of Numenera?
It's really an apples to oranges comparison. One of the great benefits of Planescape is that it had years of history behind it before we ever started up the game. It had the whole mythological aspect, so you've got all of that built in as well. Whereas with Numenera, we had to build out our own corner of the Ninth World. I don't think that game came out until 2013, and we were basically building up our mythology and doing all our stuff. So it was essentially with a blank slate is what we built up there. And I don't know that it was as coherent as it could have been because there was not a wealth of back history for us to draw on.
Yeah. All right, well, let's talk then about Planescape Torment, the computer game, your contributions on that. So what was it like working on that game? And then I have a few specific questions people have sent in about
it. It was really great. We had a really fantastic team. I enjoyed everybody we worked with. And this might be the benefit of 20 years of hindsight, erasing the bad memories of, bad decisions and stupid arguments and so forth. But, looking back on it, I have really fond memories of it. I felt like we were given a lot of leeway and a lot of latitude to make the game that we wanted to make. And we brought a lot of joy and spark to it. And, sort of that anarchic, mid to late 20-year-old energy of, just like, let's throw shit at here and see what sticks. And I feel like we got away with a lot more than we probably would have in a modern development environment.
Do you feel like it captured the setting well?
Yeah. That was one of the reasons I got hired at Interplay in the first place, is because they were working on 3 Planescape games at the time, and they hired me inexplicably to be the lead for a PlayStation game set in Planescape, and I had no clue what I was doing. So it was probably good that that got canceled and the team rolled into the Torment team. But yeah, so Zeb and I were both there, essentially as lore experts for Planescape. So I think it was, pretty damn faithful.
So here's another question from Adam. I think this is pretty fun. So does anyone actually know the Nameless one's name?
No. And I do have a funny story from Ray Valise, who wrote the novelization. He was trying to write, the Nameless one throughout there, but he's like, yeah, we've got to refer to this guy throughout the text here. And so he just had to make up a name. And he sort of regrets the book, except he got paid for it, so he doesn't regret it as much as he should.
So here's a question from Cuba, with a K. What lessons did you take away from Fallout 2? We didn't talk about that, but what lessons did you take away from Fallout 2 and Planescape Torment? What went right and what went wrong?
Well, for Fallout 2, I would say you need a strong centralized vision. When Tim and Leonard left, that sort of went away, and Matt Norton was made the lead designer, and I think it was his first gig as lead. And I think he was a little overwhelmed. So I don't think he had as strong a handle on the vision or communicating that as we probably needed. So we went crazy with pop culture references. Basically everybody took their area and just sort of went wild with it. And it didn't have a cohesive vision, I don't think.
I remember Tim and Leonard talked about how for the first game they were kind of under the radar, almost a Swampworks type production. But then it was kind of this big hit, and then suddenly they had all these people,
it's
executives interfering with them.
It's a curse, really. When you're like, okay, cool, we made this awesome thing, and everybody's like, cool, I want to get in on this. You're like, but that's not what worked last time. Yeah. So for Planescape, I think people can and do want to play games where they're intelligent, where they're not required to resolve their problems with violence. And it did centralize that idea of, it did cement the idea of a centralized vision and theme. I took both of those things into my stint as a creative lead for Ties of Numenera. And again, we had a great team. I feel like we got to be really super creative and imaginative. Everyone had a voice. Always happy to hear other people's opinions on how to make this a better thing. What went wrong with it is that we were really overambitious. We overscoped it and didn't have enough resources. We cut too much. We replaced too much of that with words. So my advice for a future creative lead would be, manage your scope carefully, because resources can only go so far.
I had a lot of questions along those lines about Torment Tides of Numenera now. People were asking about those changes that were made, and what do you like, what do you regret? What would you like to revisit?
Yeah, boy, I've got so many things to say about this. So what would I like to revisit? Well, I would like to revisit the scope, obviously. Get an accurate picture of the resources we had available to us. I would add an editor. I know we talked about getting one during the campaign, and it never happened. And I really should have pushed more for that, because I think we really would have benefited from it. But as George mentioned on his episode with you here, a lot of these things were basically first draft plus conversations. We didn't get a lot of chance to rewrite because we got under the gun. I would change out some of the companions, like I would drop Metkina for another cast-off named Riostrad, who is basically carrying around the ghost of his psychic lover with him. Thinking back on it, I when we chose to cut one of the two, I went with the easy one, and that was a mistake. Um, I would add some non-human companions. I was told that that would be an issue because of issues with animations and increasing the problems with art, or increasing the burden on art. I would adjust the ending, which we kind of had to rush, as people have noticed. And I would make the mirrors playable and not just readable. And that's just off the top of my head.
I remember talking to George. There didn't seem to be much interest in doing some kind of director's cut, version of this. Do you have the same feeling?
I would like to make a director's cut.
You would like to do it.
I would, yeah. I feel like there is a lot of potential that we sort of left on the table, and I feel like we could have brought more of that to life if we have the proper resources to do it.
I'm not really sure if I understand Adam's question here about the second Torment. What's second Torment? I don't know what he's talking about.
I do. The first Planescape Torment, when it launched, did not sell incredibly well, and neither did we had a whole lot of buzz around us for Tides of Numenera. But that also didn't sell very well, despite the critical acclaim. And come to think of it, I don't think I've ever worked on anything or ever shipped anything that was an immediate, overnight success, except maybe the complete Book of Elves, which apparently sold over 1 million copies, but I didn't know anything about that at the time. Yeah, and it's not like I saw any residuals from that. So, but I've sort of gotten used to the fact that pretty much everything I work on is, a niche audience that will eventually grow in stature over time, and I'm hoping that Tides of Numenera gets that as well.
Here's a question from evilsoft.com. Where does one continue the philosophical existential questions raised in Part 1, and what do you want to infuse into the game to give it the same feelings of thought and of depth? I put in brackets here, what does one game matter? It seemed appropriate.
Planescape Torment was a question of change and growth in life, right? What can change the nature of a man? I wanted to make a game that would ask about the nature of life itself. What makes it worth living, if anything? I was looking for an exploration that would, cover yourself, cover, others' lives, or the community, or just straight up nihilism, or, approaching one life from a utility standpoint, basically drawing in a whole lot of centralizing a lot of philosophical questions, and then presenting a lot of ways that the player could explore these questions and apply it to their own lives.
All right, just a few last things. Here's just a quick question, hopefully quick. Wasteland 2, what are your thoughts looking back on that?
I had a fun time with the stuff that I worked on. We went out to California and sat around in a conference room and basically brainstormed the story over the course of several days, and that was a lot of fun. I don't feel like the game was necessarily what we had pitched at that time, and that's okay because they had a specific vision that they wanted to go for after that, and I liked what they did with it when I played it. So
it's one of the first big Kickstarter successes, right?
Yeah. It was fun to be a part of it, and it was fun to play my stuff. I know Nathan went in and did a whole pass through the game to make a singular voice. So it was fun to play my area and see what stuck in there.
Yeah, that guy's really interesting to me because probably more so than Torment and Planescape or Pillars of Eternity and the sort of Infinity Engine games. I mean, a lot had changed since the first Wasteland game. I mean, how do you even, what a challenge to try to bring all that all the way through the 90s and do the modern times. I mean, how do you maintain anything like the original spirit, or is that even
Yeah, and I feel like we did a pretty good job with it, right?
Right.
I'm probably too close to it, but I felt like, okay, this does feel like Wasteland.
Mm-hmm. All right, so a couple of last questions here. These are from Grumpy Tentacle. Grumpy Tentacle wants to know, how important is choice and consequence for you as a writer?
Very important. I feel if you're going to not allow choice and consequence in a game, you might as well just be watching a movie instead of, moving a mouse around.
Right.
And it's fun to do it, but at some point, that whole get good mentality is just like, well, but why? What's the point of getting good here if it doesn't make a difference in the end of the narrative?
Yeah, I noticed in one of your interviews you were talking about this question too, and you're sort of comparing the experience of writing a tabletop role-playing campaign with a desktop or computer game, and you'd said that, well, in a tabletop game, chances are better than 50% that your players are going to latch onto a throwaway line from a passing sailor. And I've seen this, I know this is true. Next thing you know, you're throwing away the evening's notes. So I guess there's kind of that.
Yeah.
I remember talking to Lord British about this too. He had the same questions. There's no really good way to resolve this, right? There's just very different kinds of games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you're a really talented DM, you can reorganize them back on track. But at some point, it might become necessary to just tell your players, look, you guys, I am not at all prepared for what you want to do here. So you can go off and we can do this by the seat of your pants, or you can get back onto track here and take these carefully placed clues I have set here to entice you along this road. As opposed to the guy who I just made up, the angry barman who mentioned something about getting flatulence from some coffee beans that he found the night before. And put into an investigation.
We call it that tone. The DM gets that tone. You kind of should pop. Well, maybe we should just not go in that room, or maybe we should do this other thing because of that tone. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
There's another question about tides. This is from Maiko Silva. I actually had somebody else ask about this too, Ikurasona, about the cut content missing stretch goals, and talking about what those were, the missing companions, and a lack of Italian language support.
Well, we had a very ambitious vision for the game, and the true scope of the ambition wasn't made apparent until the full team came aboard. We thought we'd have the full production team ready to go in 2013 once Wasteland 2 had wrapped. But unfortunately, the release date for that project moved back to late 2014. And even then, many of the team members stuck with the project until the director's cut released in late 2015. So a lot of the implementation people, like gameplay programmers and so forth, were among those team members. And so we didn't really have a full team or resources until October 2015. And Torment released in early 2017. So we only had a full production team for a little over a year. But even if we'd had all those people for the full time for the 2.5 years of the original plan, we still probably would have needed to rescope. It was an extraordinarily ambitious vision, and we should have made our cuts earlier and communicated them as they happened, like too many stretch goals, adjusting the crisis system, simplifying the story and the number of areas earlier. That led to the apology video, which I was willing to make because our community did deserve an apology for our lack of communication. It wasn't the way that I wanted it to go.
I feel really, I don't know what I would do. I guess a lot of sympathy for folks that do a Kickstarter pitch. Because, on the one hand, you got to have stretch goals and you want people to be excited about the project and, basically pledge. But I guess the reality is you don't really know, what's actually going to be possible.
Yeah.
If you're dealing with a producer or company, I guess you could just say, "Well, we're sorry."
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't. It probably doesn't feel. It's probably easier to do that than it is to go to Kickstarter community and.
Yeah. We really should have said at some point either, okay, cool, these are the stretch goals that we're doing, and that's done. But this is still early days in Kickstarter, and we're just like, crap, we blew past that goal too. What are we going to do now? I don't know. We blew past everything we had planned. Quick, make something up. And, it wasn't until much later that doing that came back to bite us in the ass. And that was unfortunate because I think it created a lot of ill will in the community, and it's like I said, not the way that I wanted it to go.
Well, now that you've been through this experience and wiser, and
Yeah.
kind of it. What kind of advice would you give to somebody else that had similar plans and was wanted to launch a Kickstarter and develop some stretch goals?
Boy, I would say, plan out your stretch goals. If it seems like you are going to be blowing past them faster than you wanted, pace them out further and stretch them farther so that people aren't going to be getting past 3 stretch goals on your first day. Um, I would tell them to manage their scope extraordinarily carefully, because if you don't, then you're going to get into a really untenable situation where you're either cutting content or delaying your release. And neither one of those is something that you can really afford to do, because one of them is going to cost you goodwill with the community, and the other one is going to cost you resources that you don't necessarily have. And it's really intoxicating to be in that time of a Kickstarter, and you're like, holy crap, we're making all the money. But it turns out that $5 million is not a lot of money to develop a game when you've got a team of 50 people eventually to feed.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to end on a sad note. Let's see what else we could end up with here. I had a comment that you're talking about making a computer D&D game, and he said that as a CRPG designer, I must answer the questions that people have even before they're asked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I see what you're saying there. How do you want to try to replicate that almost feeling of, I can do anything. I can. This is a fully realized world here. But of course, it's not, right? There's all these limitations, but you don't want to give that impression to a player.
Right. But
it's quite a bit of wizardry at work here.
Yeah, but as game players, as computer game players, what the difference is between a door you can open and a door you can't, and you're just willing to accept it. Whereas if you're a tabletop player, the DM tries to gloss over the one door, and the guy's like, you know what, I'm going to go kick it down. Okay. It's a question of managing what players expect to do, and what they would like to do. And this is where iteration and just play testing early is really important, because if people are like, okay, well, I see that door there, I'm gonna go kick it down, okay, fine, you know what? If you're really that interested in it, we'll see what's on the other side. And so you can start planning out what those resources are, and you can move it from a different part here that is less interesting to the players maybe. But it's really important to just keep that process of iteration moving throughout development, because if you can't do that, then you're going to get stuck at some point.
Yeah, that really highlights just how basically how collaborative this kind of art is. Than even the novels that we were talking about earlier. Things where you don't have to worry so much about where you're going to turn the page. You don't have to worry about the reader of a book deciding to switch to page 16 for whatever reason.
Yeah, exactly. They're not going to rush the plot along by going and killing somebody all of a sudden on you.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Colin. We talked about a lot of topics here. Is there anything that you feel like you really want to talk about we didn't get to?
Boy, I feel like it was really comprehensive. I've had a good chat.
Oh, thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thanks again. Let you get back to your family. Enjoy the rest of the holiday season.
Oh yeah, I'm back into pajamas as soon as this is over.
Get back into those pajamas and have a great day.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, Matt. Take care.
And that's all for this episode. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Sorry about the delay, but to tell you the truth, what's happening here, I have started the spring semester here at St. Cloud State, and it's going to looks like it's going to be a very heavy semester for me in terms of workload. So there might be some weeks where you don't hear from me. So just apologize in advance for that. But just you have to put the day job first. I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about. But I will try to keep these episodes coming. on a at least semi-regular basis throughout the next few months. I've got Annie Vandermeer coming up next, series with her, so you can read up on Annie and maybe play her game Passenger. But a lot of great stuff coming up too. We got Kevin Saunders following Annie. I know you guys are really going to love both of those, so stay tuned. A lot of great stuff in the pipe. And as always, I want to thank you very, 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 very much for your support of Matt Chat, for keeping these shows in production. I would not do it without you. So thank you so much for that. It's just amazing to me how long I've been able to keep this show going, just because of people like you. Now, if you want to support the show, just go to that link in the show notes to the Patreon site. So please do that. It only takes a few minutes to set that up. All I ask is $1 per an episode. I think, hopefully that's not a problem for you. If it is, maybe you shouldn't be watching so much YouTube. But I'm just throwing that out there. I would also say, while you're there, take a look at some of the other YouTubers. Shane Place, for example, good friend of mine, co-author. He uses that as. Then you got Lazy Game Reviews, Metal Jesus Rocks. I mean, there's a lot of great content that you can support directly. I think that's one of the reasons I like Patreon. You don't have to go through all these other parties to, and just hope they will keep your show on the air. You get to do it. So thank you so much for stepping up to the plate. Really means a lot to me. So once again, thank you very much for your support. All right, what about that news from the Matt Cave? Okay, we got a couple, or three things. One is, I don't know whether this is good news or bad news. I guess it's kind of both. You probably heard about these fires going on in Australia. It's just, it's just mind-blowingly terrible stuff. But on, if there could be a silver lining to this, I don't know how to phrase this exactly, but the short of it is there is an Australia Fire Relief Humble Bundle. That software, a lot of game developers have come together to offer their games basically for a little bit of nothing in order to get donations to do something about this fire situation. So the good news is you can get over $400 in games for just $25. Of course, you can donate more than the $25 if you like. That's just the suggested level. And then 100% of the proceeds from this bundle go to help the people and the animals affected by the Australian bushfires. Just some of those games there: Hollow Knight, Void Bastards, Armello, Euro Truck Simulator 2. I don't know what it is about this Euro Truck Simulator 2, but take a look at that. I think it's the kind of game you either don't care about or you're going to be in love with. Hand of Fate 2, and then Quest of Dungeons, and that's just to name a few of these games. So I went ahead and picked this up. Even if you have some of the games, there's so many here. There's probably some that you don't have, and just $25. And really, you could even go beyond. You could just give them $100, and keeping in mind that you're basically helping the Australians with this. So that's Humble Bundle. I will put a link to that in the show notes. Also, this is definitely sad news. Christopher Tolkien, who is J.R.R. Tolkien's son, to tell you the truth, I didn't even know he was still around. He's passed away, though, recently, sadly. However, he did make it to the ripe old age of 95. So you might not know too much about Christopher. I knew that he helped bring some of, sort of organize some of the notes that his dad left behind and compiled some of these books. Like the Silmarillion, for example, Unfinished Tales, Book of Lost Tales. Some of these I'm not even sure I've read. Did some histories of Middle Earth, and then apparently released some tales more recently than that, The Children of Huron, Beren, and Luthien, and The Fall of Gondolin. So if nothing else, Tolkien fans owe a lot to Christopher Tolkien. So I just thought I would share that bit of sad news. On the other hand, I think we could celebrate his life as well. Be grateful to him. And then last bit of news. I don't know, this might be a little controversial. I know my brother Luke just hates this. If he's watching this, he'll probably just start fuming at me for even mentioning it. But Epic Store, yes, they are still they're still trying to lure you to their service by offering free games. And they said they would stop this at the end of the new year, but apparently have decided that they should probably continue this. You know, it's kind of, to me, a fairly transparent effort to woo people to install Epic Store and get these quote-unquote, there's always a string attached, right? There's no such thing as a free game. But you can get, let's see, 70, so they've already given away 70 games, and once you add these to the library, your library on Epic Store, I guess, you can play it whenever. You don't have to have a subscription or anything. And they're going to continue giving away these games two free games every week. And some of the ones they've given away already include Subnautica, What Remains of Edith Finch, The Witness, Alan Wake, Celeste, Super Hot, and many more. So I know, you know, I've asked this Matt Chat fans a few times about this, and you know, a lot of people are like, oh, it's fine. You know, I like getting the free games, and you know, I'd just as soon go to Epic than Steam or whatever. Who cares? You know, it's fine. But you know, it always kind of you know, some people have a very strong anti-Epic reaction. So I'm just wondering, you know, is this free games enough to kind of quell that? Does it just make you even madder? What are your thoughts on this? Are you just glad to get the free games, or do you have a problem with Epic? And I'd like to hear more about that. Just as a historian who writes about this stuff, I like to get the, you know, the range of opinions that are out there on these issues. All right, I think that will do it for the news. So let's wrap it up with a quote. Now, as I'm looking for quotes about ambition and scope and, you know, editing and all that stuff, and I came across one. I've come across this quote a few times. You might have heard it before. It's by Friedrich Nietzsche. And he says, and this is the quote, "It is my ambition to say in 10 sentences what others say in a whole book." So ponder on that, and see you guys next time.
Oh, just thinking what the little guy with funny hair once told us. The very young do not always do as they're told.